The first loom's tapestry told them where to go. The convergence point was Ironhaven encoded in the outermost ring of the light-woven record, with the matter-of-fact precision of beings who built fail-safes, the way other civilizations built irrigation ditches. 3 days until the alignment. 4 days walk to Ironhaven. The mathematics did not work, and Tibijia said so.
We cannot walk.
Zuera confirmed. She stood before the tapestry with her hands on the first loom's crystal frame, reading route data with the fluency of a woman whose entire education had been building toward this moment without either teacher or student knowing it.
4 days is 1 day too many. The alignment waits for no one.
Then we do not walk.
Tibijia was examining the root line columns ringing the chamber crystallized connections linking the Zagale's encoding interface to every grove in the territories. Each column pulsed with faint amber light. He was a soldier, not a weaver. He did not understand frequencies, but he understood infrastructure. If something was connected to something else by a physical link, that link could carry cargo as well as messages.
These columns connect to root lines. Root lines connect to groves, including groves near Ironhaven.
You want to travel through the root lines.
I want to travel through something. The Tindana have their communion roads. The Ashvale Order has its shadow paths. Every faction adapted its fragment of the unified system for movement. The Fugu Weavers must have something equivalent, or your mother would not have sent us to a loom connected to a network spanning the entire territory.
Zuera's expression shifted the recognition of someone hearing an idea they had considered in theory and dismissed in practice. Not because it was impossible, because it had never been necessary before. She turned back to the tapestry, her hands tracing the inner rings. Not the outer ring's prophecy, not the middle ring's history. The inner ring's the technical documentation, the operating manual.
The shuttle road.
She said after a silence during which her fingers moved across the light fabric, with the rapid precision of a scholar cross-referencing sources.
The pattern keepers spoke of it. An old story, old even by pattern keeper standards, which meant ancient by any other measure. A way of traveling along the encoding frequencies connecting every enchanted textile in the territories. Every smock carrying a pattern. Every ward sealing a door. Every enchanted thread woven in a cloth or stitched into garment or embedded in a building's protective fabric. All connected through the encoding layer, the Zagale's memory system. The shuttle road was the technique of moving along those connections the way a shuttle moves along a loom's warp threads. Node to node, pattern to pattern.
Can you use it?
I have never used it. No pattern keeper in living memory has used it.
The honesty was important. She was not going to promise certainty where none existed.
My mother mentioned it once, in the specific way she mentioned everything important. Casually, offhandedly, as if testing whether I was paying close enough attention to recognize the weight hidden in the lightness. She said the shuttle road was the reason the pattern keepers maintained their connection to the first loom even after the guild forgot it existed. The road could only be opened from the source, from the place where the encoding frequency originated. From here.
She placed her palms flat on the first loom's frame. The crystal warmed under her touch with the immediate, responsive heat of a system recognizing an authorized user. The tapestry brightened. The encoding frequencies, normally subsonic, normally below even a pattern keeper's threshold, rose into audibility. A vast, layered harmony of information moving through every enchanted textile in the territories, connecting them in a web that mirrored the root line network but operated in a different register. Where root lines carried communion, the slow, geological language of earth and stone, the encoding network carried information. Fast, precise, the language of pattern and cipher transmitted at the speed of woven light.
I can feel it,
Zuera said, eyes closed, hands on crystal. The encoding network opened to her perception like a map drawn in sound.
The shuttle road is here. Every enchanted textile between the looms and Ironhaven is a relay point.
Can you carry a passenger?
She opened her eyes and looked at Tibijia. The soldier stood at the chamber's edge with his hand on his weapon, broadcasting the readiness of a man about to do something he did not understand, preparing to trust someone he had known for 3 days because the alternative was walking for 4.
The shuttle road was designed for information, not bodies, but the pattern keepers adapted it. My mother taught me the technique even though she said I would never need it, which, knowing her, means she was certain I would.
Zueta's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly on the crystal.
The adaptation works by encoding a person the way the system encodes a pattern, compressing them into a frequency, transmitting them through the network, reconstituting them at the destination.
She paused.
It is supposed to be deeply unpleasant.
Unpleasant I can handle, dead on arrival I cannot.
My mother assured me the technique has been used before. She did not say when or by whom, which means it was probably her, probably recently, and probably in circumstances she did not want to explain.
Tibijia considered this. The woman had woven a self-completing pattern through dead hands, folded a smock into a three-dimensional map, and left a trail of encoded breadcrumbs leading to a chamber beneath the building where she was murdered. He was inclined to trust her travel recommendations.
Do it.
Zueta lifted the completed smock from the first loom's base. Mariama's final work, the self-completing cipher. She pressed it against her chest. The smock pulsed once, a single heartbeat of encoding frequency traveling through the crystal frame and into the root line columns and out through the network, announcing to the system, "The key is in motion."
Hold my hand,
she told him. Tibijia took her hand, firm grip, committed, the grip of a man who had done trust falls over worse drops. Zueta opened the shuttle road. The chamber blazed. Every crystal column ignited with encoding frequency, not the gentle amber of the Zagale's resting state, but the brilliant gold of an active system performing a function it had been designed for. Tibijia's soldier instincts registered it the way they registered incoming fire. Total, immediate, everywhere. Then the floor dissolved. Not metaphorically. The stone beneath his boots softened, became porous, became threads, became nothing. His legs went next, not pain, something worse than pain. Absence. The sensation of his calves unraveling the way a woven cloth unravels when you pull the shuttle thread. He looked down and saw his own body becoming pattern. His skin was thread. His bones were warp. His blood was the dye that colored the weave, and the loom was pulling him apart, with the efficient indifference of a machine performing its designed function. He tried to scream. His throat was already thread. The world became a loom. Not a metaphor, not an approximation, a loom. He was a pattern being read by the encoding network, transmitted through the frequency, passed from node to node the way a shuttle passes through warp threads. Every enchanted textile between the looms of Tamale and Ironhaven was a relay station, and he was the message. He could feel himself being read, his memories examined and compressed, his fears catalogued and encoded, his 12 years of military training reduced to a notation in a cipher he could not understand. The system was reading him the way a weaver reads a pattern completely, dispassionately, translating everything he was into a language of thread and frequency. He had never felt so naked. Not even the vulnerability of his first patrol, 17 years old and terrified, compared to this the absolute exposure of being known, entirely, by something that did not care about him as a person. He was information. He was cargo. The shuttle road did not distinguish between the soldier and his sword, between the man and his fear, between the consciousness that screamed and the boots that had been made by a cobbler in Tamale. All of it was pattern, all of it was transmitted. Zueta's hand was the only anchor. He could not feel it in any physical sense. His hands were thread, her hands were thread. The concept of grip had been translated into something that operated in the encoding frequency rather than in the domain of flesh and bone. But he could feel the intentionality of her grip. The pattern keepers were holding his pattern together, guiding him through the relay points, preventing the network from dispersing his encoded self across 1,000 smocks and wardcloths and enchanted garments. She was working. He could feel that to the strain of it, the effort. This was not a gentle ride. She was manually routing them through the network, choosing relay points, bypassing corrupted nodes where the encoding was distorted, holding 2 complete human patterns in her working memory while navigating a system that had been designed for information, not passengers. Thread burns were spreading up her arms. He knew this not because he could see her arms, but because the encoding frequency of her pain was leaking into the transmission. A sharp crimson note bleeding through the gold of the shuttle road's carrier wave. It was costing her. Every relay point, every node traversal, every second of the transmission was burning pattern into her skin. And she was doing it with the set jaw concentration of a woman who had decided that the cost was acceptable and was not interested in discussing it. Time did not exist on the shuttle road. Or rather, time existed as frequency, a vibration that Tibijia could perceive but not measure, a rhythm that organized the transmission without offering anything so useful as a clock. He had no idea whether they had been traveling for seconds or hours. The relay nodes flashed past in a sequence that his pattern-encoded consciousness registered as pulses of light in a tunnel of woven gold. Each pulse a smock or a ward cloth or a piece of enchanted fabric that received their signal and retransmitted it toward the next node, toward Ironhaven, toward the convergence point where the shuttle road terminated. Then the frequency changed. Ironhaven? The encoding network's density shifted as they approached the city. More nodes, more enchanted textiles, the frequency thickening the way a river thickens when tributaries join. Tibijia's encoded self registered the change as pressure, as weight, as the sensation of being read by more eyes than he could count. And then he was flesh. The transition was not a transition. It was a collision. One instant he was frequency, pattern, information traveling at the speed of woven light. The next instant, he was a man standing in a market square with his knees buckling, and his stomach trying to empty itself through his mouth, and his skin crawling with the phantom sensation of being threaded and threaded again. Every nerve ending firing at once, confused by the abrupt return to physical existence, his ears ringing with a sound like a loom crashing. His eyes seeing double the encoding network's golden web superimposed on the ordinary morning light of a market square, fading slowly like an afterimage. He went to his knees. The packed earth of the market square was the most real thing he had ever felt. Solid, physical, not pattern, not frequency, dirt. He wanted to press his face into it.
Breathe,
Zuetta said. She was holding his arm. Her voice was steady, but when he looked up, her face was gray with exhaustion, and the sleeves of her garment were pushed back to reveal thread-pattern burns climbing from her wrists to her elbows, raised lines of gold brown, tracing the shuttle roads encoding frequency into her skin like brands. The cost, written on her body.
How long?
He managed.
Seconds. For the network, we were data for less than a heartbeat.
She pulled her sleeves down, covering the burns.
For us, it felt longer.
Longer? Tibijia wanted to laugh. He had survived 12 years of military service. He had walked into ambushes and walked out. He had held positions under fire and retreated under worse. None of it compared to the experience of being unraveled into thread and reassembled in a market square with the taste of encoding frequency in his mouth and the sensation of having been read completely by something that did not care whether he was a hero or a coward, as long as his pattern was transmittable. He stood, his legs protested. His skin felt wrung too tight in some places, too loose in others, as though the reconstitution had reknitted him slightly off from the original pattern. He would be checking his body for days, making sure everything was where it was supposed to be. The market bustled around them, oblivious. Merchants laying out garlands for the Dambas celebrations. Children running with miniature drums. The smell of festival food yam porridge, guinea fowl in groundnut sauce, the particular sweetness of shea butter stew in clay pots. Harmattan dust catching the morning sun and turning it gold. Ironhaven rose ahead of them. Red laterite walls, iron-banded gates, the chief's audience hall visible above the roofline, with the enskinment chamber's ventilation shafts protruding like fingers reaching for the sky. Somewhere beneath those walls, 3 levels down, the corrupted enskinment pumped its poisoned frequency through the system. Tibijia straightened. His soldier's instincts had already assessed the market exits, sight lines, crowd density. Unfamiliar territory, no official authorization, no credentials except a dead woman's smock and a pattern keeper's word. In military terms, unauthorized insertion into contested territory, no extraction plan, no support. He had worked with worse.
The smock.
He said,
Can it guide us to the rejected one?
Zuetta held the smock against her heart. The encoded pattern pulsed a quiet, directional pull, the key seeking its lock.
The old quarter, the pattern is pulling toward the old quarter.
They moved into the crowd. A pattern keeper with thread burns hidden under her sleeves, carrying her dead mother's legacy against her chest. A soldier whose skin still felt like it had been knitted by someone who had never seen the original, carrying his weapon and his attention and the specific, invaluable skill of noticing things that others overlooked. 3 days to the alignment, the last pattern was in Ironhaven. And in the place behind Tibigia's eyes where his body's memory lived, the shuttle road played on a loop the dissolution, the reading, the reassembly. He would be dreaming about it for years. The moment a soldier became thread and learned, in the space between pattern and flesh, that the body he had trained and fed and scarred for 30 years was just a weave that something larger could unravel and reknit at will. He did not like the lesson, but he understood it,